Welcome to the Carey Nieuwhof Leadership Podcast. Today, something different, a brand new experimental format on the podcast. Hey, we're approaching a decade, might as well do something different. And on this episode, I'm going to share some thoughts, some ideas, and some teaching, I suppose you can call it. There's no guest. It's just me. Now, these episodes are going to be a lot shorter. As usual, I hope it helps you thrive in life and leadership. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, your summer break is coming up. And to that point, today on the podcast, I want to help you rethink rest. There is so much being said these days about rest. Rest is good, but I'm going to tell you why it's not enough and why it doesn't work. And I'll give you 4 key strategies to sustain peak leadership performance beyond the summer break. And here's why. Okay, summer vacations are breaks. I'm going to take one too, but for so many leaders, time off doesn't fully refuel them. They come back and minutes after they return, they're exhausted. I mean, you probably had that happen before. I've had it happen before. We'll look at why that happens. And then I'm going to share with you 4 strategies to help you sustain peak performance when you're back so you can feel as good or almost as good as you did on your summer vacation. Okay, does that sound good? Because that's what we're going to do in this podcast. Now, in this episode, I'm going to be talking a lot about your time, your energy, and your priorities. And that's something I cover extensively in my course, At Your Best. And if any of this hits close to home and you want to dive deeper into this, you can learn more at yourbesttoday.com. That's yourbesttoday.com. And today's episode is also brought to you by church.tech. How would you love to have your message stick a little bit longer in the minds and the hearts of the people than just delivering it on Sunday morning and hoping it's going to do that? Well, you know how to do that. You can do that by creating small group study guides, devotionals, dinner table questions, sermon clips, social media, and more. And you're probably like, well, I'm not a big church. I don't have a team. Or maybe you have a team, but they can barely keep up. Well, what if you could do it with the click of a button? That's it. Well, if you can, and you're interested, that's church.tech. Your church message can go further than ever. Church.tech will help you do it. Sign up today by going to church.tech. Use the coupon code CAREY, my name, at checkout. So, are you ready to dive in? Well, here's the goal. You've already noticed as a leader that even a great summer vacation isn't enough to really refuel you for the fall. And if that's the case, you're not alone. For example, did you know 41% of Americans experience burnout after taking time off? That's what a national study shows. I want to say that again. 41% of Americans experience burnout after taking time off. And get this, 34% of employed Americans report that burnout typically sets in immediately after returning from their time off, while 50% indicate it occurs within 1 week of returning. Okay, you tracking with that? Like you take a week off, 2 weeks off, 3 weeks off. You come back, almost half of Americans, they say they're burned out. And for those who feel that way, 50% say it happens in the first week. It's like my whole vacation vaporized. And I am familiar with this phenomena. Before I burned out, I was about a decade into leadership. For the first few years, I was like, I don't want to take any time off. I can't afford it. So I'd take like 5 days and then come back and preach the weekend when I was leading a church. And then I thought, my wife made some sense. And she said, hey, you need to really take some time off. So I would take a week off, and then I grew it to 2 and then 3. And I thought, okay, this is going to refuel me, right? I had 6 to 8 weeks I could take off, but I didn't want to do it. I was just too driven. And often, like by the Monday or Tuesday of getting back, even when I was taking 3 weeks off, the whole vacation would vaporize. I was that statistic. I wasn't quite burned out, but I was exhausted. It's like, how did I feel so good last Thursday? And how do I feel so terrible this Tuesday? If you've ever been there when you've come back from vacation, that's what we're talking about, because you know this drama, right? And then, I'm not going to go into the story today, but if you've been a long-time listener, I hit a wall, I burned out, and on the other side, I've rebuilt my life. So now I take a month off in the summer and I take a couple of other weeks off. I'm usually 6-7 weeks of vacation in a year. But when I come back, I'm not tired anymore. I don't burn out. And I don't know when the last time, probably like a few months ago, I took a vacation. I feel as good today as I did on my vacation. Okay, so how do you get there? How do you get to the place where you're feeling as good on a random Thursday as you did on a Thursday by the ocean? Okay, that is the question I want to solve. So the problem is that time off won't heal you when the problem is how you spend your time on. There's so much being said about time off. I'm a fan of time off, but I'm also a fan of time on, right? You can't take 5 Sabbaths a week. You can't do that. And some of you take a Sabbath. Some of you have even taken a sabbatical, right? And you're back, and like you're back after 3 months on sabbatical and you're exhausted. And that's why sabbaticals don't work. If the purpose of your sabbatical is to recover so that you have another 5, 10, 15 years left in the tank, it's not going to work unless you figure out how to handle your time on. So time off is not the cure for an unsustainable pace. What is? A sustainable pace is the cure for an unsustainable pace. A lot of people know how to vacation well. They don't know how to vocation well. So if you think this is just normal, if you think, well, every leader gets tired and that's why we have vacations and that's why we have annual leave and that's why we do sabbaticals, well, I want to tell you, it's a terrible way to operate. I operated there for a long time, sort of redlining it, and it's a bad idea. I want to share a few reasons, like what's at stake, a few reasons about why it's such a bad idea not to be rested when you're working. Okay. Yeah, you're going to be rested. You know how to vacation well. You're going to have some time with your family. That's awesome. But when you're back, how do you sustain peak performance? Well, when you're tired, 3 things happen. Number 1, you make suboptimal decisions. The decisions you make are just terrible. I don't know about you. I think I'm a reasonably good decision maker unless I'm tired. Then I make terrible decisions. I say no to things that I should say yes to. I say yes to things that I'm going to regret when they get on my calendar. I get grumpy. I get frustrated with my team around you. And that's number 1. Okay, that's suboptimal decisions. If you're tired all the time and the only time you really feel good is when you're off, you're going to make suboptimal decisions. Second, I've already hinted at it. The people around you get the worst of you, not the best of you. So you're listening to this podcast and you might be like, Carey's a good guy. But if I'm tired, my family may not want to be around me. My team might get the worst of me. They don't get the best of me. And one of my life goals, I set this a number of years ago, is I want the people closest to me to have the best experience of me. Yeah, like a lot of people who listen to this podcast, I have people who follow me that I haven't met, and they, you've got people who follow you that you haven't met personally. They probably think you're awesome. But if your spouse doesn't think you're awesome, if your kids don't think you're awesome, if your EA and your team don't think you're awesome, like, are you really winning? I think that's losing. I mean, what does it matter if some random person in California thinks I'm fantastic, yet my wife won't talk to me, right? I want the people around me to get the best of me, not the worst of me. And it's often the people closest to you who pick up all the casualties of you not being in an optimal place. So you want the people around you to get the best of you. When you're tired all the time, the people around you tend to get the worst of you. So that's the second thing that's at stake if you're leading in the red zone all the time or on a semi-regular basis when you're not on vacation. Okay, third thing, you run the risk of making a life-altering decision you'll never be able to get back. So this isn't an episode on moral failure, but if you want to look at one of the key ingredients, there are several, okay? I've written on this extensively. We'll talk about it some other time. One of them is often, not always, but often, that leader was tired. That leader wasn't thinking straight. That leader was perpetually exhausted. And I know my judgment goes when I'm perpetually exhausted. And I think I put myself at unnecessary risk of making a life-altering decision I'm never going to be able to get back. You do the same thing if you're tired all the time. So yeah, take your summer break, take your vacation. But if you come back and you're one of, 41% of Americans who say, now I'm exhausted, you're going to make some real mistakes in your leadership. So now the question, and this is what I really want to drill down on in this episode, is what will help. All right. It's one thing to know the problem. Getting an accurate diagnosis is helpful. But I want to give you 4 strategies you can use this summer to make sure that your fall doesn't eat you up and spit you out. Okay. Because we've all been there before. And COVID did that to a lot of leaders, right? It just ate them up and spit them out. You're still standing. Congratulations. I'm proud of you. I'm in your corner. So let's talk about 4 strategies you can use after the summer to make sure your fall doesn't eat you up and spit you out. Actually, the first one, you probably want to start now. And this is what I want you to do as you're hearing this: audit your year. So I want you to look back over the last 12 months and I want you to do an audit. Not so much just a time audit. You're going to do a time audit, but you're going to pay attention to other things as well. So start with a time audit and ask yourself this question: where did your time go this year? Really, like, look back over all of your appointments, block out how you spent your time, where you spent your time at work and at home. I do a lot of travel. I did this recently with my team. We looked at exactly how many events I did, how many days I was away from home, how many days I spent traveling, et cetera, et cetera. Then you're going to know, like, if you're having trouble balancing everything, maybe you spent too much time on the road or not enough time on the road. Maybe you were just caught in meetings. Maybe you're doing 20 hours a week in meetings. Maybe that's too many. Maybe you don't know where your time went. You're like, I looked at my calendar. I can't really figure it out. Well, when you're unstrategic about your time, you're going to make strategic mistakes. So you want to start with a time audit and just be brutally honest with yourself. Just say, where did your time go? Almost as though you were doing some kind of calorie recap. Like, okay, what am I really eating? That bag of chips, that ice cream, those Doritos, right? That dinner out with friends. Yeah, I had the appetizer and the dessert and the 300-calorie latte, and I had this, right? You want to be super honest, but this time you're doing it with your time. So again, that's neither good nor bad. You just want to know where you're at, and this will help you figure out, when you do your time audit, how did you get to a place where you're either tired heading into your vacation, or maybe, you're doing okay, but you want to know, okay, because so many people hang on, I just got to get to my vacation. I just got to get to my vacation. Your time audit is going to tell you how you got tired or how you got to where you are now. So number one, you're going to do a time audit. Second part of that audit is you want to look at the meetings. How much time have you spent in meetings? Now, I don't think meetings are necessarily evil, but a lot of people, meetings are the enemy of work, and they help us get our work done. But if you're creative, if you're a preacher, if you're a leader, if you're trying to schedule, if you're a project manager, that really significant work is not being done in meetings. And I know for me, I've got a very specific number: 12 to 15 hours a week in meetings, period. That's it. That's not because I'm working a 20-hour work week. I work a lot more than that, 40 hours or more sometimes. But if I'm spending more than 15 hours a week in meetings, I'm not going to get my writing done. I'm not going to get podcasts like this done. I don't have enough margin in my work calendar to get my work done at work. So part of that is taking a look at your year-to-date meetings, and then look at your task list. Okay. So we use Asana in my company. I don't know what you use. Maybe you keep like a manual day timer or something like that. But look at your software, look at your day timer, and then try to figure out, wherever you keep your tasks, ask yourself this question: do the tasks that I have done over the last few months reflect my true priorities? Right? Because you got to empty that email inbox. You got to respond to all the messages on Slack. You've got to, respond to all the inbound you've got. But meanwhile, you're going to write a book, or you're going to launch a podcast, or you're going to create that really killer series that didn't become a killer series. It just became an other series. So do your tasks really reflect your true priorities, or have you allowed your dreams to die? And then finally, as part of this, you may want to look at your screen time reports on your phone, laptop, and other devices. How much time have you spent on social media, streaming services, and apps each week? How much of that time is productive? It's a great question, right? As John Acuff, my friend, says, Netflix doesn't want you to get in shape or write that book. It doesn't. It wants you to stay glued to the screen. This is a multi-trillion-dollar industry that is trying to keep you from doing what you actually want to accomplish with your life. So take a look at your screen time. So when you look at your calendar, when you look at your workflow and your tasks, and you look at your screen time, you're going to get an idea, a very honest assessment of how you spent your time. So that's the time aspect of doing the audit. Now I want you to go a little bit further. I want you to do an energy audit. So this one's a lot more subjective. I mean, meetings, you can measure them. If you've got them written down, you know exactly how much time you spent in meetings. But your energy audit is going to be a little more subjective. And maybe you want some input from other people on this. And I want you to look back over your last 6 months to a year and ask yourself, when was your energy at its best? Like you look at February and go, man, I was in the dumps in February and I don't know why. I was tired all the time. But you think about March and it's like March was a lot better. Okay, well, pay attention to that. And then try to ask yourself, well, why was March better than February? Or maybe you notice like even a smaller pattern than that. Maybe you notice that, mornings, I'm pretty bright. By 4 o'clock, I'm dragging my knuckles. I'm tired. Overall, how was your energy level? Maybe even give it a number. Was it a 9 out of 10? A 4 out of 10, a 6 out of 10? Ask yourself that question. Were you energized most days, exhausted or depleted? Or if it came in waves, when were those waves and what was true? And then finally, you want to do a commitment audit. So you've got time, energy, and now commitments. What commitments did you take on, looking at all of this that you already know that you shouldn't have? And then we're going to get into this. How can you end them this year? So you want to do your time, your energy, and your commitment. Now, by now, hopefully you do this before your summer break, you've got an idea of how you've spent your last year. That's your audit. And once you have all of those insights, you're going to learn a lot about yourself because there's the story we tell ourselves in our heads, and then there's what you actually do. Right? What you actually do is often different than what you think you do. And now it's sort of like eating. As I said earlier, there's what you thought you ate, but when you track your calories, as I do, you're like, oh, that's what I really ate. Okay. Now you know. All right. So we can move on to strategy 2. Number 1 is do the audit. Number 2, make some categorical decisions. This is one of my favorite things to do. Extremely easy to understand, very difficult to execute. I say it's my favorite thing because when I do it, things get better. When I don't do it, things get worse. But categorical decision making is a superpower for leaders who have too much to do, which these days is most leaders. So what you do with categorical decisions is you make decisions about certain things that you just say, all right, I'm never going to do these, or this is how I'm going to do these. And by one decision, you make 100 decisions. So let's start with meetings. There's some categorical decisions you can make about meetings. For example, you might go forward and saying, coming back from my summer break, I am not going to do any meetings more than a half hour. I know people who say the default for all of my meetings moving forward is 30 minutes. I find I often need more time than 30 minutes, but I almost never book anything other than a podcast for more than an hour. You might say, okay, I'm not booking any meetings on Mondays or Fridays or Wednesdays. Pick a random day. Categorical decision, no meetings on Friday, no meetings on Wednesday. Pick a day, maybe 2 days. Some people do 2 days. It's just like, I just never do meetings. So if someone says, are you available on Wednesday? You're like, nope, I'm not available. So you see how that's a categorical decision? One decision that you make that really changes a lot. That's an operative decision for 52 weeks a year. You made it once. I don't do meetings. Other things you can do with categorical decisions, the types of meetings you take. You might say no to like picking your brain meetings or meetings without an agenda. Sometimes people just want to meet. It's perfectly normal for you to ask, can you tell me what you want to meet about? Because then you know whether it's going to be a good use of their time and your time. Maybe somebody else is better positioned, or maybe this is a meeting you really want to take. So you might say, I just don't take meetings without an agenda or without a stated purpose. Another thing you can do, and I've got more resources I'll tell you about that can help you with this, but high drama people. Oh my goodness. I mean, there are people who are just absolutely exhausting, and they're often the frequent flyers. This might be a great time to draw a boundary and say, I've got 1 slot a week for high drama people, or 1 slot a month for high drama people. And you know who I'm talking about, like names are coming up. And the problem is when you don't have boundaries or pre-decisions about it, you can spend all of your time all day long on high drama people. Not a good idea. Or I'll give you one more example to categorical decision making. If you're part of a large church, you might have to draw some boundaries around weddings or funerals. That's something I had to do. I did all of them in the beginning, and then the church just got too big. And by the end, it was basically, if you're not family or a very, very close circle, I'm probably not doing your wedding. I'm probably not doing your funeral. Now, some of you are already chafing at these categorical decisions. You don't like being boxed in. You think they're unfair. You think they're difficult. Maybe you've got a fear of missing out. Well, a couple of things. Number one, try time limited. Do that for 3 months and see how it works. And secondly, the other thing you can do is you can make an exception. If you really want to do this particular wedding, do it. If you really want to take that particular meeting on a Wednesday, take it. Like, you can do that, right? So try time limited. And then if you really have to make an exception, you can make an exception. But that kind of categorical decision making is game changing. And it has really helped keep me out of redlining over the last 18 years. So here's what categorical decision making does. It saves mental energy and a tremendous amount of time because you've already made the decision. Case closed. Move on. So that's the second strategy. Now, the third strategy is manage your energy, not just your time. So what do we mean by that? Well, this one's easy to understand, very difficult to do. Everyone has 24 equal hours in the day, but not all hours feel equal or produce equally. So I want you to think of your day in 3 zones: green, yellow, and red. Okay, green is when your energy every day is at your best. For morning people, that's me. That's the morning. For night owls, it might be the afternoon, right? You don't really get going until about 11 o'clock. And then your red zone is the opposite of your green zone. That's when you're exhausted, you're tired, you're dragging your knuckles. Yeah, you're kind of fried. For me, that's 4 to 6 most afternoons. I'm just not very good at 4 to 6. And then anytime after 9 p.m., yeah, lights out. I'm done. Okay. Yellow zone, everything between green and red. It's the time when you're not at your best, but you're not at your worst. And you can get a lot done in your yellow zone. So the secret to managing your energy is to do what you're best at when you're at your best. So when I was a preacher for over 2 decades, in the old days, I used to just write my message whenever I could. And that didn't work out well because when I could turned out to be too many Saturdays. So when I started to really cooperate with managing my energy, not just my time, I protected my green zone on my calendar, which for me is mornings, 7 to 11 a.m. And I would start writing my message on Monday. And I would usually finish it by Tuesday. And then, because I was doing this systematically, I started to work ahead, and I was done a week in advance, 2 weeks in advance. And for years now, when I'm doing a series, I will be done that sermon series before it even starts. It's finished. It's off to production. It's done. That's what happens when you do what you're best at when you're at your best. When do I write talks like this? I write it in my green zone. Because in my red zone, I can stare at a screen for an hour, peck out 5 words. That's about all I'm good for because my brain isn't working. In my green zone, I can get it done optimally, and it's great. So the secret to managing your energy is to figure out, to track it, and then do what you're best at when you're at your best. And then number 4, this one's really big. Finally, find something to focus on outside of work. So simply deciding not to work won't work. Okay, I learned this the hard way because I'm like, okay, I'm going to take some time off. And, if you're at a beach, it really helps. But if you are just taking a Sabbath or something, you're just sitting there, it's too easy to work. You got your phone handy, you got your brain running. So if you love your job like I do, it can be hard just to decide not to work. And technology has not made this any simpler. So what do you do? Well, what I would suggest is when you're not working, when you're on vacation, your summer break, when you're taking a normal day off, you've got to have a hobby, an intense activity, or something that really takes your mind off of your work. I've got a really good friend. He's been very public about this, Craig Groeschel. He decided he was going to take up jujitsu and flying. You can't focus on anything else when somebody else is beating you up or when you're flying an aircraft. It demands his full attention. For me, I'm a little bit less intense, but I love cycling. I love hiking. I love boating. We live near a big lake. I love getting out on the boat. And you know what? This is the final thought I'll leave you with when it comes to really finding something meaningful for your time off. You should develop over the next year a 2-hour vacation. And I thought about this. I've got a couple of 2-hour vacations, and I want to suggest you probably do too. And the question for a 2-hour vacation is, what activity do you do that feels like you're on vacation? It has to be 2 hours or less. Doesn't have to cost a lot of money every time you do it. So we live near a lake. When I am on the lake, it can be on our boat or it could be on a canoe. We have a canoe as well. It's like the world doesn't exist. I don't know what that is. It's kind of magic. Often movies or reading where you get fully engrossed in a story or a book, that can be really good as well. But I asked leaders this and I said, hey, what do you do that feels like a 2-hour vacation? Here's a list of ideas from other leaders. Okay, stargazing. One person said, I love studying the night sky. Everything else disappears when I do it. Other ones said golf, pickleball, pedicure. Yeah, I'm not into that, but hey, maybe that's magic for you. I don't know. I'm not judging. For those of you who like that kind of thing. Someone said gardening, movies, swimming. One guy said driving around the property in his tractor. He's just in heaven when he's doing that. Someone else said a sauna. I don't have a sauna, but a lot of you do maybe, or have access to one. Sauna does that. Someone else said cooking. I just really lose myself when I'm cooking. You see, the point is if you're sitting on a chair trying not to work, you're going to end up working. But if you've got an activity like a 2-hour vacation that refreshes you, where the world doesn't exist, wow, that's powerful. So the bottom line as we wrap up, you can live in a way today that will help you thrive tomorrow. That will help you win the marathon ahead. You want to live in a way today, every day when you're not on vacation, that will help you thrive tomorrow. So what did we cover? Here's what you now know. 41% of Americans experience burnout after taking time off. That's what a national study shows. 34% of Americans employed report that burnout typically sets in immediately after returning from their time off. And 50% says it occurs within 1 week of returning. This is not good. The stakes are high. When you're a tired leader after your summer break, you make suboptimal decisions. The people around you get the worst of you, not the best of you. You run the risk of making a life-altering decision you'll never be able to get back. So what do you actually do to make it better? Well, there's 4 things. Number 1, audit your year. Take a look at your time, your energy, and your commitments, and be honest about how you spent that. And then what gave you energy, what didn't. Number 2, you're going to start making some categorical decisions. You're going to start looking at, I'm not doing meetings like this. I've got a day free of meetings. I'm only going to meet with this type of person at such and such a time. And you're going to manage your energy, not just your time. And finally, number 4, you're going to find something to focus on outside of work, a hobby, a 2-hour vacation, something that can really help you de-stress so that when you're not working, you can stop working, which is so hard. And you're going to live in a way today that will help you thrive tomorrow. Hey, if you found this helpful and you enjoy this format, would you let me know? You can share it on social. You can tag me. I'm Carey Nieuwhof on Instagram. Text it to a friend. And when you leave a rating and review, everything gets better. The show gets bigger. We get great guests. And before you wrap up, I want you to check out my At Your Best course, because by now, you know that time off won't heal you, because the problem is how you spend your time on. So the question becomes, well, what do you actually do about it? If you want more on this, I've got a program called At Your Best, and it's a proven strategy to get your time, energy, and priorities working for you, not against you. That means that when you are working, you'll finally be focused, productive, and you'll start making real progress on your biggest goals. And when you're off, you'll be unplugged, you'll be relaxing from the ground up. And it's a lot more comprehensive than I can do in a podcast like this. You'll rethink how you spend each hour of your day, week, and month, and plan it on a calendar. And you'll get piles of day-to-day strategies, skills, and insights to live and lead at your best. Now, I've trained 50,000 leaders in this strategy. It's been proven to help leaders reclaim anywhere from 3 to 15 productive hours every week. That could be almost half your work week freed up for what matters most. If you want more, go to atyourbestcourse.com. And if you're listening to this on release day, this round of registration is closing tomorrow, May 24th at midnight. So if you want to implement this in your life for the summer, now is the time to act. perfect. And if you're ready to start building the life you until now have only dreamed of, visit atyourbestcourse.com. And don't forget to check out church.tech. With a single click of a button, you can actually turn your message into a small group guide, devotions, social media content, a lot more. Visit church.tech to get started and use the code Carey at checkout. So guess what? Next time we are back to our regularly scheduled program, and we've got some guests. We've got Ken Costa in the house. Also coming up, Matt Chandler, William Ury, Ken Blanchard, Will Gadara, just booked Charles Duhigg, Priscilla Schreier, and a whole lot more for the podcast. And when you leave ratings and reviews, it makes a really big difference. I want to thank you so much for joining us today. Thanks for this, indulging us in this experimental format. We'd love your feedback. And I hope our time together today has helped you identify and break a growth barrier you're facing.